Dharma talk. It is hard to obtain a human body. Venerable Thích Thông Lạc gives the teaching. Audience, lay Buddhists. Time, year 1993. 1. It is hard to obtain a human body. Beginning on the 14th day of the 9th month of the year of Kui Dao, 1993, the Master will continue to enter meditative absorption for 48 hours. Because of this condition of causes and conditions, the Master has a few words to remind the Venerables. It is hard to obtain a human body. In the life of cultivation, you Venerables will encounter a type of negative people. They believe that we are people who possess sufficient blessings and conditions with the Buddha's path. But among us there are also those of inferior faculties, those of medium faculties, and also those of superior faculties. Those of inferior faculties and medium faculties cannot cultivate in one lifetime and become a Buddha. They must pass through many lifetimes and many rebirths. Is this statement correct or not? The Master will analyze and teach you Venerables so that you clearly see that this line of reasoning is not correct. This line of reasoning is the reasoning of lazy people, of those seeking benefits and offerings, of those full of sensual desire, of those who try to catch fish with two hands, of those who have lost all will for cultivation. They want to become a Buddha, but do not want to leave the world. They want liberation from birth and death, from the cycle of rebirth, from suffering and afflictions, but they do not want to abandon sensual love and worldly pleasures. Those who reason in this way are demon kings within Buddhism. This line of reasoning causes us to lose all will for cultivation, leaving us only cultivating half-heartedly to pass the days and months in order to enjoy worldly sensual pleasures. Venerables, on the path of cultivation, we will confront karmic retribution and the mind of sensual craving of our own selves. When we cultivate, we constantly fight against our own mind of desire in order to preserve the precepts, in order to protect our mind from the 5 sensual pleasures of the world. This mind will have many reactions and will cause us suffering, hardship, and difficulty. While we are cultivating, sometimes we feel that we no longer have enough strength to fight against them. They arise with chaotic thoughts, together with a body that is tired, sluggish, exhausted, and lazy. Therefore, we are no longer steadfast in determination. We lose our stance in cultivation, and then a mind of confusion and wavering arises. Suddenly, we remember this statement and believe that the Buddhas have taught it, so we rely on it and consider ourselves to be of inferior faculties. From there, laziness arises again. We no longer wish to practice meditative concentration for liberation, and only know how to practice goodness and perform wholesome actions. From that point, we begin to change our way of cultivation. From that point, the precepts are violated. From that point, dignified conduct and refined manners no longer remain. Always contacting external conditions, speaking noisily and carelessly, speaking wherever something is encountered, laughing improperly, walking and standing without calmness and gentleness, always eating at improper times. Although they frequently do charitable social work, giving alms, making offerings, or acting as a doctor, treating illness, or acting as a chanter, performing rituals for the dead and for peace, or acting as a teacher, giving Dharma talks and explaining the sutras. They believe those actions are the practices of the Bodhisattva path, are messengers of the Tathagata. Among you Venerables, there are also some lay practitioners who vow to cultivate the Bodhisattva path. They also give alms and make offerings, do good and avoid evil, work in temples without pay in the hope of creating blessings in the future. Venerables and lay practitioners. When you venerables cannot overcome the mind of sensual love, the mind that enjoys worldly sensual pleasures, then even if you serve for 1,000 lifetimes, give alms, and make offerings for 100 kalpas, you will never escape from the mind of sensual love and the mind of sensual pleasure. Therefore, life after life and rebirth after rebirth, you, venerables, must drift and roll in the ocean of suffering, of birth and death, in the cycle of rebirth. Because the statement, inferior, medium, and superior faculties, is a statement of irresponsibility, a statement of unconsciousness, a statement that causes much harm to those who cultivate in later generations. Venerables, cultivation is not an easy task. When you truly begin to cultivate, you will see immeasurable difficulties, from correcting our cruel and violent temperament to become gentle and kind, from correcting the mind that craves sensual pleasure to become a mind that does not crave sensual pleasure. That means you must live opposite to the life of the world. From that point, the sensual body and sensual mind of you venerables will react, seeking every way to block the path and obstruct the road, making it difficult for you to advance toward liberation. People only hear the words inferior, medium, and superior faculties. But how many people know at what level inferior, medium, and superior faculties are? They only speak vaguely in order to cause discouragement in practitioners whose determination has not yet become firm. Here, the Master advises you to understand that these words are the words of lazy people, of the ghosts of craving, of the demons of sensual pleasure. When they say these words, they fear that no one will believe them, so they attribute them to the Buddha. But they do not know that the Buddha taught to obtain a human body is difficult. To hear the true Dharma is even more difficult. This teaching is very correct. Then how is obtaining a human body difficult, and how is obtaining the true Dharma difficult? To answer these two questions, the Buddha gave the example of a blind turtle and a floating wooden yoke in the middle of the ocean. Venerables, have you ever gone to the seashore? Have you ever gone to the sea? When speaking of the sea, it means speaking of vast sky and water. On the sea, there is a blind turtle, swimming and searching for a floating wooden yoke. That is a difficult thing. For us to obtain a human body is just as difficult. These words, surely few people believe, but that is a truth. The sea water is vast and boundless. A small wooden yoke drifts into it, and a blind turtle cannot see the path. Then one must ask, how can it see the wooden yoke? That is a difficult thing. In the vast ocean, the wooden yoke and the turtle hardly have the karmic affinity to meet each other by chance. That is a difficult thing. To have affinity, to have sufficient sentient conditions of the law of cause and effect for the turtle to encounter the wooden yoke, that is a difficult thing. Venerables, you venerables do not yet clearly understand the law of cause and effect. Therefore, you imagine that losing this body, you will immediately have another body. This is not correct. Based on the law of cause and effect to examine, we firmly confirm to obtain a human body is difficult beyond measure. If there is no karmic affinity, it is difficult for us to encounter a human body. If we happen to lose this body, then certainly it will be difficult for us to obtain a human body again. Why? The law of cause and effect has governed all beings in the universe. We are certain that in this life there is not a single event that occurs by chance or accident. But it must be said that there is a law, although invisible, yet very definite and very impartial, not missing even the smallest amount, for all beings. Precisely in every action of ours, of all beings, that action is called the law of cause and effect. With regard to the law of cause and effect, no one can escape from it. Therefore, beings find it difficult to obtain a human body. So, now we have already obtained a human body, we must regard this body as something priceless. If we know how to use it according to the true Dharma, then the benefit is extremely great, immeasurable. On the contrary, if we use the body like an ordinary object, it is also like a precious jewel. A person who knows considers it a precious treasure. A person who does not know considers it a common seashell. In this world, there are so many people who value the body in the wrong way. They use the body as an object to seek sensual pleasure, causing the body to quickly decay, wither, and gradually die away in meaninglessness. Venerables, when we lose this body, do not imagine that there will be another new body. How many evil intentions of you venerables, because of chasing fame and profit, eating, sleeping, and sensual desire in the present life, you, venerables, have intentionally or unintentionally shortened the lives of living beings. A blood debt must be repaid with blood. You venerables must understand that from this cause you will forever be born as living beings through immeasurable lifetimes to repay those drops of blood that you have sown. Venerables, examine carefully in the life of you venerables. Certainly when you die, you will not be able to be born as a human again. If you are born as a living being, then you will not have wisdom, and ignorance will be even greater. Every day, you often see living beings killing one another, slaughtering one another without the slightest compassion. Living beings often kill one another to eat flesh, and so that they themselves can live. They only know that much. In the life of a living being, at that time, who is the person who teaches doing good and avoiding evil, forbearance, giving, making offerings, cultivation, to obtain a human body with wisdom, to know right and wrong, good and evil, to know the law of cause and effect, karmic retribution, of suffering, rebirth, and the cycle of rebirth, and also to have the karmic affinity that Buddhas appear in the world, manifesting to teach us to cultivate, to do good and avoid evil, to practice forbearance, and also teaching us to cultivate meditation in order to attain liberation. If a human being obtains a human body but does not have the conditions to encounter Buddhas or noble sages appearing in the world to teach the Buddha Dharma, then that person is no different from an animal and may even be more cruel and deceitful than an animal. Humans skillfully conceal. Animals reveal openly. Both animals and humans are not different. They only differ in that humans are intelligent and skillful at concealing, while animals are ignorant and reveal openly. Once one has become an animal, then the killing of one another becomes even greater. That is, creating evil causes. Then how could one obtain a human body? Venerables. That is the difficulty of obtaining a human body. From this life as a living being to another life as a living being, it is difficult to have the accident of transforming into a human life. It must be said that one will never again be able to become human because of the cruel instincts of animals. The more they are accumulated, the more cruel they become. Therefore, it is difficult to obtain a human body. Someone asks, why on this earth are human beings increasing in number day by day? People even have to restrict childbirth and implement family planning. If it is said as above, then this earth would have no human beings. Venerables, here the Master says obtaining a human body is difficult. Once it is lost, it cannot be found again. That means once we lose this body, we will forever not find it again. As for human beings who are born now, they arise from the good causes of gentle animals, such as cows, buffaloes, deer, and stags, and so on. From within a life as a gentle being, living on grass and leaves, not biting and harming, not killing one another. And many times, unintentionally, they sacrifice themselves to help other people or other beings. Sometimes they sacrifice themselves so that other people or other beings may live. These unintentional good causes have brought those beings to obtain a human body. Just as now, you venerables are able to hear the Master teach the practice of wholesome virtues such as forbearance, giving, making offerings, abandoning the evil mind, and distancing from the mind that craves sinful sensual pleasures. That means you venerables have sufficient causes and conditions to be able to hear these good teachings. Then, from that point, you venerables strive to avoid evil deeds and perform good deeds. Because of planting these good actions, you venerables are born as humans in the next life. If you venerables do not hear this teaching, in daily life you chase after fame and profit, eating, sleeping, and sensual pleasures to satisfy the mind of craving. Then you venerables create more evil karma and cannot escape the 6 paths of rebirth, forever becoming living beings. Here, how many people are able to hear this teaching? That itself is a difficulty in obtaining a human body. Today, you venerables already have sufficient good conditions to obtain a human body. There are still countless other beings, from insects to birds of the sky and animals of the earth, who have not yet been able to obtain a human body. The reminder and warning of the Buddha is for you venerables to examine yourselves that you have sufficient good conditions and blessings to obtain a human body. It is also a warning so that you venerables strive to cultivate and do not waste the precious time of a human life. Venerables, at present, who knows this precious body, they only spend their time chasing worldly pleasures. Those pleasures are like water bubbles, like morning dew. Pleasure appears, and suffering follows. Yet all people in this world are spending the precious time of a human life on things without meaning. They only know to foolishly use their bodies to satisfy false and impermanent pleasures. They only know to torment their bodies to the utmost suffering through illusory pleasures. Meanwhile, their body is an extremely precious thing. One must pass through hundreds of thousands of lifetimes as living beings in order to obtain a human body. They are deluded to the extreme. They do not know to use the body like a floating buoy, like a raft, to cross beyond the 3 realms and the 6 paths of rebirth. They do not know to use this body like a miraculous medicine to save themselves from the illness of greed, anger, and delusion, and escape. The 3 painful realms, they do not know to use this body like a golden key to open the door of liberation. They do not know to use this body like the most supreme means to bring themselves from an ordinary person to become a completely virtuous and transcendent noble being. Because obtaining a human body is difficult, extremely difficult, yet they use their body to become a fierce beast, a poisonous snake, a cunning, deceitful ghost, and a cruel and terrifying demon. As evidence, you venerables have witnessed these types of people. They once lived in this monastery. They even dared to wear the disguise of disciples of the Buddha while committing depraved and impure actions, selling the Buddha, selling the Dharma, selling the Sangha, to seek fame and profit, craving and sexual desire. They regard hell as nothing. They do not know that the law of cause and effect will punish them forever, lifetime after lifetime, in the ocean of suffering, of birth and death. To conclude, it is hard to obtain a human body. We hear Tran Han Tong, a Zen master who founded the Truklam Zen school, say, Ving vi lak jung, fong tran katan hat viengia huang van li tin. Venerable Thích Thông Lạc, translated, Lang thang lam khach fong tran quen hangai mot muon lan damsha. At this point, you monks hear about, to hear the Dharma is even more difficult. 2. To hear the Dharma is even more difficult. To hear the Dharma is even more difficult. Then, in what way is hearing the Dharma more difficult? Venerables, you must pay attention and listen carefully in order to understand clearly. From insects to birds of the sky and animals of the earth, none can understand the Buddha Dharma. Only human beings have sufficient awareness and wisdom to understand the profound and wondrous teachings of the Buddha. These teachings aim to help human beings end suffering, birth, aging, sickness, and death, and escape the cycle of birth and death and rebirth. To understand these teachings is very difficult. That means one must understand them correctly, without deviation. Venerables, in this age, we understand the Buddha Dharma incorrectly. Most people interpret the words of the Buddha, turning these teachings, instead of practice methods, into mere theories and making them a subject of study. Because of this, no one attains the fruit of arahantship and complete liberation, ending rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. For so many centuries, Buddhism has had so many people following the path of cultivation, yet those who attain the fruit of arahantship, there are none. Therefore, to obtain the Dharma is even more difficult, precisely at this point. If one understands correctly, then practice is correct. If one understands correctly, then cultivation leads to liberation. If one understands incorrectly, then practice is incorrect. If practice is incorrect, then one falls into heretical teachings and non-Buddhist paths. Specifically, you venerables have already seen that Buddhist monks today practice incorrectly. Therefore, they break the precepts, live lives like worldly people, lose all purity of conduct, destroy the reputation of Buddhism, and lack dignified conduct and refined manners. Therefore, to obtain the Dharma is even more difficult. To obtain a human body, but not have the conditions with the Buddha Dharma, therefore, it is difficult to encounter the true Dharma. As concrete evidence, you venerables have seen every day so many scriptures being sold and so many Dharma talks. Every temple everywhere has them, yet they never read them and never go to the temple to listen to Dharma teachings. The number of such people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who are able to read scriptures, who are able to hear teachings of the doctrines of Buddhism, but their conditions are not sufficient to practice. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who are able to read scriptures, who are able to hear teachings of the doctrines of Buddhism, but they fall into developed Buddhism in the form of a philosophy, psychology, or theology. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who are able to read scriptures and hear teachings of the doctrines of Buddhism, but they go to become ritual priests, performing funeral rites, praying for the dead, praying for peace. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who are able to read scriptures and hear teachings of the doctrines of Buddhism, and even practice them, but they lack a person with experience to guide them. Therefore, they waste an entire lifetime of cultivation. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures and hear teachings of developed doctrines through interpretations of scholars, therefore their practice has no result. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures, hear teachings of the doctrines of Buddhism, but become talisman masters, sorcery masters, fortune day diviners, exorcists who expel ghosts and demons, or ritual priests who perform star offerings and offerings to remove misfortune. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures and hear teachings of the true doctrines of Buddhism, but they do not have a person with experience to guide them. Therefore, they practice incorrectly, and it becomes a path of non-Buddhist teachings. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures and hear teachings of the true doctrines of Buddhism, but they do not practice. They only study empty theory in order to seek a graduate degree in Buddhist studies. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures and hear teachings of the true doctrines of Buddhism and are guided by good spiritual friends, but laziness arises in their minds. They cultivate carelessly without diligence. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. Obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures and hear teachings of the true doctrines of Buddhism and are guided by good spiritual friends, but they practice according to their own desires. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. To hear the Dharma is even more difficult. There are many people who read scriptures and hear teachings of the true doctrines of Buddhism and are guided by good spiritual friends. At first they cultivate diligently. Later, they gradually become lazy and finally give up. The number of these people is also countless. That is the difficulty. To hear the Dharma is even more difficult. The Buddha recounted a story, difficult to hear the Buddha Dharma, for us to contemplate. One day, the world-honored one was residing at the Jetavana monastery. 5 people came to request the Buddha to teach the Dharma. The Buddha joyfully and kindly gave them a teaching. When the Buddha was teaching the Dharma, these 5 people sat listening in a distracted manner. One man nodded off to sleep again and again. One man kept tapping the ground with his hand. One man kept playing with a dry branch. Another man looked around everywhere at the sky, the clouds, the forest, the mountains. Only one man remained sitting attentively listening to the Dharma. Venerable Ananda stood beside the Buddha, fanning him, and was surprised by the behavior of the 5 visitors who had requested to hear the Dharma. So, when they had just left, he immediately asked the Buddha, world-honored one. The Dharma talk that the world-honored one delivered resounded like thunder in the sky, yet only one person listened attentively, while the others were distracted. World-honored one. Why is that? Ananda, do you think that my teaching is easy to hear? World-honored one. Does the world-honored one consider it difficult to hear? Yes. World-honored one. Why? Ananda, these people within the cycle of rebirth have passed through many lifetimes without ever hearing the name of the three jewels, let alone any of my methods of practice. Therefore, now they cannot penetrate my teaching. Their lives enter and leave the cycle of birth and death without end. They have long heard the sounds of animals, the voice of greed, anger, and delusion, the voice of jealousy, envy, arrogance, and conceit, the voice of craving for fame and profit. Furthermore, they have spent almost all the time of their life in eating, sleeping, entertainment, singing, gambling, drinking alcohol, and smoking, or intoxicants. Therefore, how could they still have the mind to listen to my teachings? That is precisely the cause why the Buddha Dharma is difficult to hear. As evidence, you venerables look at human beings in this world. You venerables must understand clearly. Therefore, to obtain a human body is difficult. To obtain the Dharma is even more difficult. Venerables. You venerables are people who have sufficient conditions with the Buddha Dharma. At present, you venerables have obtained a human body, have heard the true Buddha Dharma, and also have good spiritual friends with experience to guide you. Why then do you venerables say that you yourselves are people of inferior faculties or medium faculties? You venerables should reflect and examine again. The teachings the Master has given above are concrete evidence. At present in this world, there are very many different religions, and there are also very many different methods of cultivation. Within Buddhism alone, there are already many methods of practice, but they are not necessarily the true methods of the Buddha. People say that Buddhism has 84,000 methods of practice because there are too many methods. Therefore, no one attains the fruit of arahantship, and also because there are too many methods, therefore no one practices correctly the precepts of the Buddha. Because of this, Buddhist monks today all violate the precepts. They do not see the precepts of the Buddha as a firm refuge for themselves. They do not see the precepts of the Buddha as their pure teacher. Therefore, in this period, obtaining the Dharma is even more difficult, 100,000 times more difficult than in the time when the Buddha was still alive. Previously, our elder masters studied and practiced according to the Mahayana teachings only because they did not have the conditions to encounter the original Pali Canon. They were influenced by Eastern Zen of the Chinese people and by Mahayana scriptures. They considered the Agama scriptures to be Hinayana scriptures. Therefore, they looked down upon them and despised them, only studying them to know them. As for practice, they followed the Mahayana teachings, considering them to be a supreme method. Therefore, for so many centuries, since the day the Buddha entered nirvana, after 500 years, there was no longer anyone who attained the fruit of arahantship. There was only the study of empty theory. Today, we are much more fortunate than people of the past. We are born as human beings. We encounter the original canon, which are the scriptures spoken directly from the golden mouth of the Buddha. But it is known that after such a long time, there are some suttas that later people added into them. Even so, its original character still remains. These scriptures were translated from the Pali language into the mother tongue by Venerable Minh Chao, a Vietnamese person, a talented scholar, a highly learned intellectual who carried out this Buddhist work. Therefore, we encounter the true Dharma of the Buddha and read it in our mother tongue. Because of this, it becomes extremely easy for us to understand. Venerables, why do we rely on the arguments of lazy people to destroy our precious practice? We even listen to the arrogant and conceited words of reckless people who claim that the true teachings of the Buddha are Shinayana, so that later people follow them and become mistaken. Then they despise the true Buddha Dharma and discard the true teachings, and they chase after and praise methods that are not the Buddha Dharma. Such a rare opportunity. If we are not alert, we can easily be deceived by empty terms and empty theories and miss the true practice at such a good moment. Venerables, this is a rare occurrence in the time of being born as a human being and growing up with sufficient conditions with the Buddha Dharma. Therefore, we have obtained what we have today, a human life being born and encountering the Buddha Dharma is a rare occurrence. A human life being born and encountering the true Dharma is a rare occurrence, because being born as a human and encountering the Buddha or the true Dharma, then certainly we will transcend the 3 realms and the 6 paths of rebirth. Once again, we examine ourselves and see that we possess all the fortunate conditions to be born in this time. We have a human body. We have the true Buddha Dharma. We have good spiritual friends with experience to guide us. From these observations, we confirm that those of superior faculties are not somewhere else, but are ourselves. The Buddha's teaching is already clear. To obtain a human body is difficult. To hear the true Dharma is even more difficult. Yet we have already fulfilled them all. Therefore, let us rejoice. There is no more doubt. We are people with karmic affinity and with full blessings to cultivate for liberation. Why then do we abandon these blessings to search for something else? Here you venerables must examine carefully. Inferior, medium, and superior faculties are arguments of those whose resolve on the path has declined. They seek ways to live comfortably within worldly pleasures while wearing the robes of cultivation. Therefore, they use words to cover their mistakes and their laziness. I remind you once again, obtaining a human body is difficult, but you must know that a human life is extremely short. This body exists today and is gone tomorrow, like the shadow of a galloping horse passing a window, like floating clouds before the wind, like the hibiscus flower that blooms in the morning and fades in the evening. Yet we foolishly crave worldly pleasures, chasing this circle of suffering and entanglement again and again, letting precious time drift away, unwilling to diligently practice cultivation. It is truly a great waste. Dear monks, what more is there to say? This body is impermanent. This body is a nest of sickness, of aging, decline, and suffering. You must diligently cultivate. You must bring forth all the strength of your life to fight against the worldly desires within your minds. You must be bold, courageous, and fearless. Do not let your minds become infatuated, tempted, and drawn into the pleasures of human life. You must grow weary of worldly pleasures. You must become disillusioned with them. Dear monks, what more is there? You must strive to rise up and fight against your own craving minds in order to escape the worldly cycle and end rebirth in samsara. Only this one life. Do not prolong it any further. To lose this body is to find it difficult to obtain another. To lose this body is to lose the place where cultivation can be practiced. Remember these teachings well. You must have great determination. You must have an iron will, strong and steadfast. Only then will there come a day when you are liberated from the suffering of human life. Only with this body, practicing the path, can the cycle of birth and death be ended. Dear monks, what is fame and profit anyway? Put them down. Put them down. Look at the human life and put them down. Look at the suffering of human life and put them down. Look again at the endless cycle of rebirth and reincarnation that never stops and put them down. Look again at worldly pleasures, all false and full of suffering, and put them down. Then you must bring forth all your resolve and the full spiritual strength of your life and move forward to carry out what I have taught. Do not deviate even the slightest bit. You will attain liberation in both body and mind through your own direct realization. Here is a story of sudden death. In daily life, we also often witness this kind of sudden and unexpected death. At that time, the Blessed One was residing in the land of Savatthi. There was a wealthy merchant transporting goods to sell. When he arrived at the city of Benares, the sky had already grown dim toward evening. He had to stop his cart and rest beside the river, waiting for morning to cross the river. That night, rain poured down relentlessly from one day to the next for 7 days and 7 nights without stopping. The river water rose high and the roads became muddy. The merchant thought to himself, on this trading trip, I must sell all my goods before returning. Even if the rainy season ends and winter comes, then even when summer arrives, I will still remain here until all my goods are sold. At that time, the Buddha was walking for alms along the street and passed by the caravan of merchant carts. He smiled. Seeing the Buddha smile, Venerable Ananda asked the reason. The Buddha replied, Ananda, do you see that merchant over there? Blessed One, yes, I see him. His life is about to end, yet he still plans to stay here from one season to another to sell his goods. Blessed One, is he about to die? Ananda, in just 7 more days he will die. Blessed One, in that case I will inform him. Very well, go ahead. Immediately, Venerable Ananda went to the place where the merchant was offering alms. The merchant respectfully offered food to him. Ananda asked, How long do you intend to stay here? Venerable Sir, I intend to stay here for the whole year. Only after selling all my goods will I return home. Layman, you should know that human life is truly short. No one knows when death will come. The merchant, surprised, asked, What? Am I about to die? Ananda calmly replied, Yes, layman. You have only 7 days left. Exactly 7 days later, the merchant felt a severe headache and lay down. Before long, he died. Because of this cause and condition, the Buddha spoke this verse to encourage us on the path of practice. You must remember this well. You must strive diligently. Do what must be done only in the present moment. Do not wait for tomorrow. For who knows tomorrow? Everyone is powerless before the scythe of death. Happy is the one who only knows how to live in the present. That person is the wise one. Here, I would like to remind you once again, obtaining a human body is difficult. Hearing the true Dharma is even more difficult. Therefore, you must be diligent and energetic, striving in cultivation to leave the house of birth and death, to escape the suffering of the world and to end the cycle of rebirth. But this task is not easy. Once again, I remind you, you must be steadfast in your resolve, firm in your heart, and persistent. Only then can you attain the true liberation of the Buddha's path. And now you also remember the words of encouragement of Zen, Master Huangba. To escape the dust of the world is not an ordinary matter. Hold firmly the end of the rope and keep your stance steady. If not for one spell of bitter freezing frost, how could the plum blossom easily release its fragrance? The talk ends here. I would like to conclude. I wish you diligent progress in cultivation until the day of completion. Namo Fundamental Teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Before eating lunch, I have a few things to advise and remind you on the path of practicing meditation. 3. Practicing meditation incorrectly gives rise to demonic obstructions. Recently, a Theravada monk came to visit the monastery and reported to me that he had once practiced meditation in Thailand and Burma. He is a Vietnamese person from Can Tho, who later went to America and has a temple there. Previously, he studied under the northern tradition. Later, he followed the southern tradition. Because of this condition, he went to Thailand and Burma to practice meditation and further study the teachings of the Buddha. He greatly enjoys practicing meditation. But he encountered inner demons, which caused him to no longer be able to continue practicing. He wanted to find an enlightened teacher to help him overcome these demonic obstacles, but he has not yet met anyone with high meditative ability. Today, upon meeting me, he wished to stay here for 1 month so that I might help him. I said, the current situation is that the monastery is not permitted to allow strangers to stay, especially a monk who lives in America. Therefore, those who practice meditation throughout the country must pay attention and be careful. Do not rush to enter incorrect samadhi, creating inner demonic obstacles, causing the Buddha Dharma to become a heterodox teaching. As proof, at present, Buddhism has already become a heterodox religion, yet no one even knows. This is because the practice is not correct. Therefore, inner demons manipulate it and cause the true path of the path of liberation to be lost. Here is a letter sent to Min Tam and Tam Nu. I will read it again for you to hear. You should calm your minds and listen carefully. Where explanation is needed, I will explain further so that you understand clearly. Here is the letter. October 6th, 1993, sent to Min Tam, Tam Nu, Mai, and the children Tuyen. No. This time you came to visit me, but did not meet me. Do not be sad. This is the 3rd year of my retreat to guide the monks. But now, only Mat Han remains, able to go together with me. All the others have given up. That means they could not keep up and must wait for the next course. You should wait. After I come out of retreat, I will answer everything, including why the monks gave up. It must be said that this is a common illness of the mind of you all, of those who practice Buddhism today. In my opinion, the path is not difficult, but it is difficult because the human heart has not yet abandoned worldly pleasures. After Mat Han and I finish entering the meditative attainments, I will open the retreat and meet you again. You should wait. You often return to visit me. Do not be sad. Mai's concentration of the mind is quite good. Mai's breathing is fairly stable. It needs to be practiced for some more time so that the breath becomes very pure. Remember carefully, do not let the breath become too quiet, and also do not breathe too strongly. Use consciousness to practice. Do not use the faculty of imagination. I repeat, you should use consciousness to practice. Do not use the faculty of imagination. Remember this. Remember carefully. You must concentrate the mind well. Do not allow wandering thoughts and the states of the imagination aggregate to submerge the breath, even for 1 second, even for a blink of an eye. You must apply effort. Effort even more. You're applying the breath in the correct way, but often the imagination aggregate dims your consciousness. Therefore, wandering thoughts are not yet completely clean. At times, the mind has a state of gentle peace and joy, but that is only a state of imagined joyful feeling. At present, your mind does not yet have concentration. It has only achieved a single thought for a very short period of time. When the mind has concentration, that is, when there is one pointedness, then that joy is truly the joy and happiness born of concentration. But now, it is only demonic joy. At present, the circumstances of Mai and Tamnu do not yet allow you to leave worldly life. You must still strive to train the breath and abandon the worldly mind even more. If the worldly mind is not abandoned thoroughly, when concentration suppresses wandering thoughts, then this is a great danger for you and for your path of meditative practice. Why? Because at that time, wandering thoughts are absent. Therefore, your imagination mind becomes very strong. Your imagination mind also arises from the root of desire. If a meditator has not yet completely abandoned the mind of desire, but hastily suppresses wandering thoughts, then imagined desire will become the sleeping aggregate demon of you. Remember this carefully. At this point, I would like to repeat once again, if a person practicing meditation has not yet completely abandoned the mind of desire, but hastily suppresses wandering thoughts, then imagined desire will become the 5 aggregate demon of you. The path of your practice will go astray, and many accidents will occur here. First, you become insane. You become possessed by demons. Second, you fall into the cave of ghosts and die right there. That is the case of a female lay practitioner in Nha Trang, and many monks of the Katsi sect have fallen into that place and died right there. Third, your desire mind returns even stronger than before. Fourth, you speak as if possessed in a trance, claiming to be this master or that lady. And you often encounter some practitioners who fall into this fourth state. Most people encounter these monks. Fifth, you have a little supernatural power. You know past and future matters. From that, the mind gives rise to arrogance and conceit, considering that in this world, no one is superior to oneself, as with some people who proclaim themselves this patriarch or that patriarch. Sixth, the mind of fame and profit develops, liking big temples and tall stupas. The evidence of this is that our venerable monks all encounter it. Seventh, imaginative understanding becomes extraordinary, making poetry, writing literature, writing scriptures, translating books. Very well. That is the case that our senior elders have encountered. Eighth, breaking the precepts and doing impure acts. That is the case that our teachers are also encountering. Ninth, liking to argue about high and low, gain and loss, often exposing others' faults and boasting about one's own good qualities. That is some meditation monks today whom we all see. 10th, liking to snack and eat casually like ordinary worldly people. This we also often encounter in temples. 11th, liking luxurious and beautiful clothing, grooming oneself, often looking in the mirror to beautify oneself. This surely exists everywhere. Every temple has it. 12th, sitting in meditation, half awake and half asleep. from one day to the next day. This is in meditation monasteries that we have encountered. 13th, while sitting in meditation, one often sees realms of peace and joy and delights in them, often seeing immortals, Buddhas, and patriarchs. These are people practicing meditation who fall into this 13th state. 14th, while sitting in meditation, one often sees frightening and disgusting realms, seeing evil ghosts, evil demons, wild beasts, like the Vietnamese monk who has a temple in America who just met me. 15th, while sitting in meditation, one sees the divine eye, as I myself once encountered before. 16th, while sitting in meditation, one sees radiant light. Previously, I also saw this, and later, Mat Han also encountered this. 17th, while sitting in meditation, one sees oneself flying into the sky. I also encountered this. 18th, while sitting in meditation, one sees patriarchs coming to transmit mind seal and give certification messages. That is the case of Nun Than Hai and some meditation practitioners today. 19th, while sitting in meditation, one sees oneself in the past as this patriarch or that patriarch. 20th, while sitting in meditation, one is like a person sitting in a cave, half closing the eyes, neither deluded nor awake, not sleeping, yet not awake, nodding forward and backward like a drunken person. This is a case that I have encountered in meditation monasteries. Here, I have only briefly listed 20 demonic obstacles that those who practice meditation incorrectly often encounter. And there are still countless other deviant meditation states that destroy consciousness, turning a person insane, destroying human dignity. Because of falling into these demonic obstacles, people nowadays practicing cultivation cannot enter concentration, cannot attain the fruit of arahant, cannot master body and mind and birth and death, cannot end rebirth and samsara, all also from this place of going astray. Some people think they have attained realization, yet they do not know that this is incorrect practice, falling into deviant concentration, because they do not practice the precepts. They do not abandon their mind of craving for sensual pleasure. Before going forth to practice, if there is not even one thought of weariness and disgust for worldly pleasures, then you must know you will never attain meditative concentration and the liberating wisdom of the Buddha. Also right here, people nowadays practicing cultivation all give up, returning to worldly life in many different forms to begin life again. Some people take this path of heterodox teaching to deceive and cheat others with the robe of a practitioner. If one practices without meeting a person who has the experience of attaining the liberation of arahantship to guide them, then practicing to this point turns Buddhism into a heterodox religion, or turns Buddhism into a subject of study, or turns Buddhism into a strange philosophy, or turns Buddhism into a religion of spirits. The evidence you yourselves can clearly see now, as I've already described above. Therefore, if you want to practice Buddhism, you must be careful and even more careful so that you do not waste an entire life of cultivation, and so that you will not be deceived by others. You should look and see those things of true Buddhism have been overthrown and pushed aside. Therefore, nowadays, there are so many people practicing according to Buddhism. But in the end, how many people obtain anything? Or is it only a number of people studying empty doctrines that many others have embroidered, added to, or explained incorrectly? Therefore, they live a life that is not truly life, a path that is not truly the path. They only chase after worldly fame and profit, and in the end, only for their own personal enjoyment. 4. The method of practice to enter concentration safely. If you practice the breath carefully and completely abandon the mind of worldly sensual pleasure, then at this point you only need one more stage. Leave the world, live in solitary seclusion, and continuously concentrate the mind on the breath which you have already practiced until it becomes skillful. At this point, I remind you once again, leave the world, live in solitary seclusion, concentrate the mind continuously on the breath which you have already practiced until it becomes skillful. At that time, you will enter concentration easily, a kind of concentration that is very safe, without demonic obstacles. Just go straight on that path and enter without difficulty. Why is that? Because you practice correctly. You practice with a foundation. That means you train from precepts to concentration and wisdom. At every place, I have pointed out a path of practice very clearly, from the easy place you can practice to the more difficult and higher place. At first you cannot do it. Later you will be able to do it. From eliminating ordinary sensual desires to eliminating the deeper desires of the mind of lust, through the path of precepts that I have pointed out as the method of practice. When practicing the precepts and eliminating completely the demons of external conditions, then when practicing meditation, you can eliminate completely the demons of the inner mind. If you do not practice correctly according to my teachings, the demons of external conditions, together with the demons of the inner mind, will strike you down on the path of liberation, and you will never reach the destination. At this point, I remind you once again, when practicing the precepts, you must eliminate completely the demons of external conditions. Then, when practicing meditation, you can eliminate completely the demons of the inner mind. If you do not practice correctly according to my teachings, the demons of external conditions, together with the demons of the inner mind, will join together to strike you down on the path of liberation. And you will never reach the destination. If there is no determination for one lifetime of practice, then my Tamnu, you will forever still be standing outside the gate. At this stage, you must understand that this stage is extremely important and decisive for the control of the 6 sense objects, the 6 sense bases, and the 6 consciousnesses. If it is not like this, then your practice will only gather small and insignificant benefits. This stage is the stage of entering concentration. If you do not live in solitary seclusion, if you do not live alone in loneliness, then first, it is difficult to guard and protect your mind. Second, it is difficult to avoid external conditions. Third, it is difficult to keep speech karma pure. Fourth, it is difficult to concentrate the mind continuously on the breath. Fifth, it is difficult to look at the mind like a rock wall. Sixth, it is difficult to break the inner bodily demonic obstacles. Seventh, it is difficult to go beyond the breath. Eighth, it is difficult to break the imagination aggregate. Ninth, it is difficult to break the feeling aggregate. 10th, it is difficult to have a pure mind. 11th, it is difficult to have the mind of the 3 knowledges. 12th, it is difficult to have liberating wisdom. If you create sufficient conditions and are able to live in solitary seclusion, then you can guard and protect your mind. If you can guard and protect your mind, then you can avoid external conditions. If you can avoid external conditions, then you can keep speech karma pure. If you can keep speech karma pure, then you can concentrate the mind continuously on the breath. If you can concentrate the mind continuously on the breath, then you can look at the mind like a rock wall. If you can look at the mind like a rock wall, then you can break the inner bodily demonic obstacles. If you break the inner mental demonic obstacles, then you can go beyond the breath. If you go beyond the breath, then you can break the imagination aggregate. If you break the imagination aggregate, then you can break the feeling aggregate. If you break the feeling aggregate, then the mind can become pure. When the mind becomes pure, then the mind has one-pointedness. When the mind has one-pointedness, then the mind enters concentration. When the mind enters concentration, that is the mind that has cut off desire. The mind that has cut off desire is the mind that is calm and clear. The mind that is calm and clear is the mind of the three knowledges. The mind of the three knowledges is the mind of liberation. At this point, the merit of practice is completely fulfilled. To speak is easy, but to practice is very difficult. Do not think that practicing according to Buddhism is simple, is easy, like other religions. Because it is difficult and few people can practice it, therefore it has an extremely high value. In practicing according to Buddhism, you need to pay attention to this point. If this thing is practiced successfully, then that other thing can be practiced. But if this thing is not yet finished, then that other thing will never be finished. For example, a person who practices the precepts, but the precepts are not yet completed, yet hastily practices meditation, then that meditation is deviant meditation, or will never be attained. Because if this can be practiced, then that can be practiced. If this has not yet been practiced successfully, then that also cannot be practiced. This is a long chain of the method, precepts, concentration, wisdom, in a process of practice, from easy to difficult. If anyone practices stubbornly out of order, then they will never enter concentration and will never attain liberation, master birth and death, or end rebirth and samsara. Knowing that it is difficult, but you should be at ease, your practice has the teacher beside you. You should look again at the examples of the ancients who practiced cultivation. Bodhidharma faced a rock wall for 9 years. Zen master Dieu Cao Feng looked at the mind for 30 years without leaving it for even 1 minute, except for 2 times of eating porridge. Shakyamuni Buddha lived 6 years in ascetic practice, which no one has ever lived through. Master Jai An spent 12 years in retreat, and whenever 1 stick of incense burned out, yet the mind had not been subdued, he shed tears. 5. Practice requires perseverance and great determination. Why is cultivation so difficult? Here you listen to the encouragement of Patriarch Huangba on the path of practice, so that we see that the path of practice is not easy. If not for 1 spell of bitter freezing frost, how could the plum blossom easily release its fragrance? If on the path of practice you only practice casually to pass the days and months, then even for hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, you will not see the way. Because cultivation must use the utmost effort to practice, only then can one hope to see the way. If you say that practice is easy, then why would Huangba say, not 1 spell of bitter freezing frost? In the monastery, I have witnessed reality. As soon as I required you to eat 1 meal a day, in only 3 days, you already complained of dizziness, fatigue, lack of nutrition, and that you could no longer continue practicing. You asked me to allow gradual practice, and finally you had to eat 3 meals, morning light meal, noon main rice meal, evening noodle soup with beef or milk. This monastic life is the life of Eastern Zen. It is not the meditation of Buddhism, because Buddhism eats only 1 meal a day. When I then set the schedule of practice, You were again attacked by dullness and drowsiness. Now everyone sits with their heads drooping and sleeping, or nodding forward and backward until the time ends. Some people secretly enter their rooms to lie down and sleep to satisfy their desire for sleep. Seeing this scene, I immediately understood those who enter retreat alone do so to stay inside their rooms, to eat and sleep. When they come out of retreat, their bodies are fat like pigs, and their skin white and rosy like young girls in spring. Seeing this, people usually praise them, saying, "A practitioner truly has a radiant appearance. Fat, plump, white and rosy, truly a person who has attained meditation and become a Buddha must have such good appearance." You must know that such good appearance is the good appearance of worldly people, the appearance of eating much and sleeping much. As for us, we have experience, practicing according to Buddhism, according to the spirit of liberation in Buddhism. A practitioner must master their eating and their sleeping. If one is master of eating and sleeping, then one cannot eat or sleep improperly. If one does not eat and sleep improperly, then how could the body become fat? The precepts of Buddhism were established so that one practices to master eating and sleeping at the proper time and the proper hours. Vongbot was a provincial governor. He heard that in his province there was a Zen master who had attained the way. He came to visit and inquire about the way. When he saw Zen master Tri Thuong, he immediately said, "Seeing is not equal to hearing." Indeed, it was so. When hearing people say that Tri Thuong had attained the way, he imagined that Tri Thuong would have a radiant and majestic appearance, as often described in Mahayana scriptures. But when he met the Zen master, he only saw a thin skeleton, like an old monkey, without any radiant appearance at all. It was only a thin old man, skin covering bones. Because the moment he saw the Zen master, all the beautiful imaginations in his mind, as taught in the Mahayana scriptures, collapsed completely. He was disappointed, so he spoke. Seeing is not equal to hearing. When hearing, it sounded extremely beautiful. When hearing, it sounded extremely lofty. Yet, seeing it, it is nothing at all. His imagined dream had shattered. He wanted to turn back and leave without even meeting him. But Tri Thuong said, "Do not despise the eyes and praise the ears. Do not despise the ears and praise the eyes." Because of this sentence, Vongbot stayed and later became his disciple. Because in cultivation, if you do not strive, if you are not courageous, if you do not abandon worldly pleasures and benefits, then you will never see the way. And if you truly abandon worldly pleasures, then your body will only be skin-covering bones. If the blood in your body has not dried, if the bones in your body have not decayed, then that way you have not yet seen. The path of liberation practice must be arduous and difficult. It must have perseverance and firm resolve. It must have courage and stubborn endurance. One must regard this body as light as a feather, regard death as a thin thread hanging a bell. If you still cherish this body, I fear you will find it difficult to reach the Western land, because to escape the dust of the world is not an ordinary matter. The matter of leaving birth and death and ending rebirth and samsara is not an ordinary matter. If it were something that anyone wanted to do and could do, then it would not be an extraordinary matter. I sympathize with you. This work does not demand an extraordinary person, but only demands a person with perseverance and great determination. This work is also difficult, not easy. If someone is lazy, then it is difficult. But on the contrary, if one is diligent and energetic, sooner or later, it will be accomplished. If it were impossible, then no one could do it. But if it were easy, then why can no one do it? Difficulty or ease lies exactly here. Whether you truly practice cultivation or not, whether you truly have the determination to seek liberation for yourselves or not, whether you see that this dusty world is full of suffering or not, if you truly have sincerity, have determination, and see that this life is full of suffering, then cultivation is not difficult. 6. Buddhist meditation has entering and exiting. In practicing meditation, there is entering and there is exiting. If meditation has no entering and no exiting, then that meditation is not the meditation of Buddhism. Why is that? Because when the Buddha entered nirvana, he successively entered the different meditations and the different concentrations, from the first jhana to the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, entering and exiting, entering forward, entering backward, 3 times. Then he entered the 4th jhana and entered nirvana. You must understand that this is the path of meditation of Buddhism, with a definite way in and a definite way out. The path of teaching meditation that I teach is also like that. Although the terminology used is different from the Buddha, the entering of the meditations and concentrations is the same. At the beginning, I teach you to enter counting the breath. After practicing the method of counting the breath skillfully, I teach you to abandon counting the breath and enter following the breath. After entering following the breath skillfully, I teach you to abandon following the breath and enter the state of joy and happiness. After abiding in the state of joy and happiness thoroughly and skillfully, I teach you to abandon joy and abandon happiness, abandon the feeling of suffering, and enter the pure mind. This way of entering and exiting meditation corresponds to the 4 jhanas of the Buddha. In the first stage, I teach you to practice living according to the precepts and the holy conduct of Buddhism. If you want to live according to the precepts and the holy conduct of Buddhism, then you must practice living exactly as the Buddha lived in the past. Living as the Buddha lived in the past is divided into 3 parts. First, eating. Second, sleeping. Third, living in solitary seclusion. You must struggle to live correctly in the way of eating, the way of sleeping, and the way of solitary seclusion. During the time of training these 3 practices, you stabilize the breath by the method of counting the breath. Counting the breath is a method of practice of mindfulness so that you have enough strength to remain calm before all temptations and all trials of life. Because of that calmness, you will strictly keep the precepts, and also because of that you can leave the mind of worldly pleasures, and also because of that your deportment and refined conduct can become complete. Counting the breath is a supportive method for you to practice the precepts in purity. Counting the breath is a method that helps you have full awareness to completely defeat the evil states in your minds. Counting the breath is a method that helps you have clear awareness to abandon your mind of craving for sensual pleasure. Counting the breath is also a method that helps you leave worldly sensual pleasure and enter the 1st jhana. If on the path of meditation practice you look down on the method of counting the breath, then you will never practice the precepts in purity. You will never defeat the evil states in your minds, and you will never abandon the mind of worldly sensual pleasure. And you should also know you will never enter the 1st jhana. That is the initial method for meditation practice. If a meditator lacks this foundation, then the practice is useless effort, because it is important, yet few people have known it. Therefore, monks nowadays all break the precepts. Venerable teacher, is your method of counting the breath the same as the counting breath method of the great master Tiantai-ji? The elder replied, no. The counting breath method of Master Tiantai-ji in the Six Wonderful Methods is a method that suppresses wandering thoughts in order to reach stillness. But my method of counting the breath only helps you be mindful so that you remain calm before every event, every circumstance, and every object, so that you defeat your own minds in evil actions and unwholesome things, so that you defeat your own minds and leave far away from sensual desires. My counting breath method is a practice of mindfulness to see correctly a true reality, to think correctly according to the true Dharma, to help you leave worldly sensual pleasure, to overcome your craving minds, and so that you can enter the first jhana, because in order to enter the first jhana, there must be joy and happiness born from separation from sensual desire. Only then can one enter the first jhana. That is the first type of meditation among the 4 meditations of Buddhism. My method of counting the breath helps you strictly maintain the virtue of the precepts, leave far away from the 5 worldly pleasures, and enter the first jhana. At this point, do you see that my teaching method has a clear structure, has practice from easy to difficult in order to attain the meditation of Buddhism without deviating from the path of Buddhism? This is also the first Vietnamese person guiding Vietnamese meditation, yet reaching the goal of liberation from the original Theravada root of Buddhism. You should examine again whether it is correct or not. When the precepts are strictly maintained, counting the breath is skillful in mindfulness, and the holy conduct is complete. That means you have already left worldly sensual pleasures. Leaving worldly sensual pleasures means entering the first jhana. At this point, I teach you to abandon counting the breath and enter following the breath. Practice following the breath for a period of time until it becomes skillful and refined. When following the breath becomes skillful and refined, I teach you to abandon the breath, abandon following the breath, and enter stillness. That is, to eliminate applied thought and sustained thought, corresponding to entering the second jhana. Venerable teacher, in the second jhana of Buddhism, does this stillness correspond to the Ji in the 6 Wonderful Methods of Master Ji? No, the Ji of Master Ji is only stopping the breath, keeping the mind quiet in order to contemplate. But the Ji that I teach is stopping the breath, eliminating applied thought and sustained thought in order to enter joy and happiness. That is entering the second jhana, corresponding to the second jhana of the Buddha. When the practice of Ji becomes skillful and deeply absorbed, then you abandon joy, but still keep happiness, thus entering the third jhana, corresponding to the third jhana of the Buddha. At this point, I teach you to abandon happiness and abandon suffering, to break imagination and eliminate feeling, to master body and mind freely in birth and death. When you want to die, you die. When you want to live, you live, no longer being hindered by fear of birth and death, ending rebirth and samsara, entering the pure mind, that is entering the 4th jhana, corresponding to the 4th jhana of Buddhism. At this point, the merit of practice is completely fulfilled. In summary, so that you can easily understand, my meditation is not the meditation of the 6 Wonderful Methods. My meditation is the meditation of Buddhism, having full experience from my own body to guide you to practice on the path of Buddhism without fear of going astray. And the method of practice has discipline, has a clear structure, so that anyone who skillfully practices can immediately attain the result of liberation. My meditation practice goes from virtue to liberation, without complexity, very simple, without superstition, precise like science, without long theoretical explanations like the Mahayana scriptures, very direct and practical in daily life. My meditation has a way in and a way out, just like the meditation of the Buddha in the past. As for meditation that has no entering and no exiting, that is the meditation of Mahayana. I do not discuss this matter, because whoever has affinity with any method should practice that method. Do not argue about superiority and inferiority, because it brings no benefit to either side. Whoever practices and attains liberation, that is what is precious. People nowadays, after practicing only 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, already want to retreat. They want practice to be easy. They want Buddhahood to come quickly. They wish for liberation from birth and death. Yet they do not abandon worldly, sensual pleasures. Birth, aging, sickness, and death they fear greatly, but the mind of sensual desire they do not want to abandon. Practicing in such a way, how can liberation be attained? How can rebirth and samsara be ended? Tam Nu, Min Tam, Mai, and the children, please wait for me. When I come out of retreat, I will help you practice cultivation. Tuyen, try to study diligently, often practice mindfulness, and keep the goal of liberation. When I finish guiding Mathan's practice, I will come out of retreat and guide you. Once again, do not be sad. Please wait for me. One day, teacher and disciples will meet again. Is that not so? I greet you and wish you joy and good health. You should continue to practice diligently what I have taught. Do not let precious time pass by in vain. Your teacher. 7. Practice to light the torch of Buddhism. Now you have heard the letter that I sent to the family of Min Tam and Tam Nu. You should pay attention. In this letter, the path of meditation practice that I teach is the meditation path of Vietnam, or to say it directly, it is the path of Vietnamese Buddhism, practiced by Vietnamese people clarifying Buddhism, not influenced by world Buddhism, which is distorting the path of the Buddha. Now you clearly understand. Reading the Zen history of 129 Vietnamese Zen masters, all were influenced by Chinese Zen, Japanese Zen, and Tibetan Zen, turning Vietnamese Buddhism into a philosophical religion. Because philosophy turns Buddhism into a subject of study to train Buddhist doctoral scholars. This is incorrect. Vietnamese Buddhism must truly practice and truly realize, to prove to world Buddhism that Vietnamese Buddhism is a bright torch for the whole world to see by its light. Therefore, you should strive to practice cultivation, to light the torch of Buddhism, to make a radiant and glorious light, to become a good example for everyone, and to build a beautiful moral society for tomorrow. Venerable teachers, what is more precious than taking oneself as a moral example to build moral people, a moral society, a moral nation? That is the duty of the venerable teachers, the responsibility of the venerable teachers, of every person who is following Buddhism. Do not refuse this duty. Do not avoid this responsibility. O children of the Buddha, venerable teachers, please, together with the teacher, make effort in practice. Do not fear hardship, difficulty, and toil. Be firm in heart and steadfast in mind. Beside the venerable teachers, there is still the teacher. Do not shrink back. Move forward. The teacher is the one who leads the way for you. The teacher holds a torch to light the road for you to walk. You no longer fear falling into pits and holes. What is lust for? What is money for? What is fame and profit for? So that, throughout the world, war spills blood and flesh scatters. Here, the teacher asks to end today's talk, wishing the Venerable Teacher's diligence in practice. Homage to the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha.